Hospital Port as pride and dignity stop the New World Order. Welcome to HPANWO TV. Yes, and this is another review of Project Blue Book. I'm probably going to get through them all now before I do anything else. I'm not sure. It depends what happens. On the subject of other things happening, excuse me, I still got a bit of a cough. I noticed from comments in the other videos I've done recently that a lot of people have a lot to say about the coronavirus. I've done a live stream on the coronavirus, and perhaps I think some of you want me to say a few more words about it. Well, I won't be doing that on HPANWO TV probably for a little while, at least a week probably, but I have done several articles on the HPANWO Voice blog about the coronavirus since I did the live stream here. And I've also, the last two HPANWO radio shows have been about the coronavirus. So rather than repeat myself on YouTube, why don't you just pop over to HPANWO Radio and HPANWO Voice, and I've got a lot to say about coronavirus there. Okay, but we are doing Project Blue Book still. We're doing Project Blue Book. That's what this video is about. Now, I was told this is episode 8 I'm going to review today. It's called What Lies Beneath, which is an intriguing title, isn't it? Now, as you know, I was a little bit disappointed with episode 6. If you remember, I felt that the ending was a little bit, it didn't quite work. The story didn't quite fit together properly, and so I was a bit disappointed by that. The last one, the Skinwalker, that was pretty good. And like I said, it was all gearing up to a non-ET explanation. But then suddenly at the end you get the hint that there is something really paranormal going on there. Now this, episode 8, What Lies Beneath, well, all I can say is they've regained their former glory, because what I've just seen I think is the best Project Blue Book episode of all, certainly for season 2. It's really excellent. It's full of intrigue, it's full of all kinds of things, a lot of stories are tied up. Oh, it's really exciting. It's really brilliant. Now, it begins with a meeting in the countryside. As I said, there's going to be spoilers, as always. Quinn and Hynek go and meet this guy in the countryside. He's an insider. Now, before he turns up, there's a little bit of a flashback. Now, something happened just after the Washington, D.C. invasion. That is basically what happened at the end of season 10. Sorry, season 1, episode 10, which is the famous Washington invasion where Quinn see something in the sky, and a lot of people see things on the ground. This is based on a real event that happened in July of 1952 in the US Capitol, where there was indeed a massive UFO activity above that particular city. That's one of the most well-documented UFO cases of all time. Now, what happened is they get back to the office, and Faye, the secretary, she gets them a bottle of champers and things like that, and things like that. It's going to be like a big celebration. And this guy walks in and he says, "My name is John and I work at Hangar 18." Now, Hangar 18 is very, very famous. Now, you probably heard the phrase Hangar 18. It refers to a supposedly secret location within Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. Now, Dr. Irina Scott has written several books about this, and I've interviewed her actually. She's a very interesting lady, and her books are fascinating. And in fact, I think I've discussed them on this program before. Certainly, I think in one of my Exopolitics UFO Disclosure series, I think I've discussed Dr. Irina Scott and her books. And she has come up again in this series of films too, over the things to do with angel hair at in Florence, the incident at the football stadium. Now, this guy bursts in and says, basically, "I need to speak to you." He says, I've been hired as, officially I don't exist, but I work for the Air Force as a mechanical engineer in Hangar 18, which is just like a storeroom," they say. And Quinn says, "It's just a storeroom, there's nothing there in Hangar 18. Ah, he says, "You go 6 floors down. Go down in the lift, and you find something there." Yeah. Now, this is something that is said to be true. This is rumoured to be true. I don't know if specifically it is, but a lot of people talk about, there's been a lot of witnesses coming out talking, including Irina, talking about an underground segment at Wright-Pat, which is basically where they deal with UFOs and things like that. Now, this is hardly surprising because Wright-Patterson Air Force Base used to be called Wright Field, which is home of the Technical Data Section. So this is where, if say a Russian aircraft, this is in the early Cold War, certainly in World War II as well, if an enemy aircraft was captured, it would be examined in this particular place. It's where they'd have engineers to go over it, see if they could find out its weaknesses in terms of warfare. So if it had a certain weakness, they could develop a weapon to counter it, or indeed possibly back engineer a copy. Now that we know that from the official media, during those few hours between the Roswell announcement, the disclosure announcement, RAAF captures flying disc in July of 1947, and I think it was about 8 hours later the second headline came out: General Ramey empties Roswell saucer. Yeah. During those 8 hours of disclosure, the only 8 hours we've had so far, hopefully we'll get a lot more soon, during those 8 hours of disclosure, they talked about how they'd taken the wreckage from Wright Field they'd taken it from the Roswell Army Air Base and they've flown it to Wright Field. And that's when the story goes cold. We know it was taken to Wright Field. Since then it may have been moved to Area 51. It's possible, we don't know. But this guy said he worked for something called the Technical Air Intelligence Unit. I mean, these things tend to have very, very Orwellian names. You may have noticed. You often get this. They have some kind of strange wording. It seems quite innocuous and normal, you know. And this is an example of it. They're not going to name something UFO Examination Laboratory or anything like that. They're going to call it, you know, the Technical Air Intelligence Unit. So if anyone comes across something like a paper, like a document or something, they look at the header and they just see that before someone whisks it away, they're not going to be suspicious. That's probably the reason why. But it's a bit I suppose it's a bit Orwellian as well. You know, I tend to notice things like this. But anyway, this guy says, I work there and I want to give you some more information. We've got to do it off base. I can't just give it you now. Well, he gives you a little taster, because what happens is he leaves them a little paper wad, and inside the paper wad is that little disc-shaped implant that was removed from the guy in season 1. Do you remember in season 1 where the couple break into the laboratory and they hold Quinn and Hynek hostage? And they're loosely based on Betty and Barney Hill. The star map and things like that. Very loosely. They're not like Betty and Barney Hill, but they're loosely based on them. And basically, this guy has an implant in his nape, right back here, in the back of his neck, and he gets one. I can't remember exactly what happens, but he gets somebody to remove it, and it's disc-shaped. It's like a little coin. It's about the size of a small coin. And this is inside this package that John leaves them before he buggers off. And he also gives them an address where to meet, because they're going to meet up somewhere. So Quinn and Hynek, of course, go to meet up with him, and instead what happens is this cop car drives up, and this military policeman gets out and says, General Valentine and General Harding request your presence urgently. Yeah, so basically what's happened is John has been caught sneaking secret stuff out of the base. Secret material out of they don't mention Hangar 18 or anything like that. They just said this guy has been caught sneaking stuff out. This guy who's working on stuff, he says what we were working on was not Russian. I actually I think John is slightly based on Bob Lazar. It seems there's a lot of similarity to that character and the story of Bob Lazar. So John is arrested because he's caught smuggling evidence out of the base, and you wonder what the hell's going to happen to him now. But it's a little bit of a sticky moment, because Valentine says, we know he called by your office last night. What did he do? And they have to think up an excuse very quickly, and Quinn goes, well, he just said he just wanted to meet us. He said he didn't give us anything, he just said he wanted to meet us, which is sort of half true, isn't it? He didn't mention the implant. But you can see that General Valentine is suspicious now. He's suspicious of the two of them, and he says, next time, never do anything like this without telling me first. So he gives them a dressing down about this. And you can see that he's suspicious of Hynek and Quinn now. Very much so. So anyway, flashback to the present day. Hynek and Quinn are by this roadside in the middle of the country, somewhere, where they think no one can find them. But they do. I mean, it all turns out that they discover it in the end. And this guy turns up. Now, his name's Andrew Garner. I don't know if that's a real person. Andrew Garner, I don't know. There's an actor called James Garner, I don't know. But he turns up, and he says he's working for a man he can't sell, but he's a senator in Washington, D.C., and he's very interested in getting the truth out about UFOs. And he's so certain of this, he wants to do this. He says he wants basically to have a congressional hearing on disclosure, and of course that is what happened in '69 with the hearing then. And again, of course, there was the citizens' hearing in 2013. What Steve Bassett and the others are trying to do is get like a proper congressional hearing yet again. And this guy says, me and my boss, the senator, want a full investigation. But what's going to happen is, he says, that the government have been keeping this secret. The presence of extraterrestrial life, this decisive evidence they have, this physical evidence like with Roswell and stuff like that. And it's now a detriment to national security and the well-being of the country, and people have a right to know. You have all this... so basically, this guy is a kind of a Steve Bassett-like character, I would say. He's a bit of a Steve Bassett. I mean, Steve Bassett is a lobbyist. He doesn't actually work for anybody in the government, but I suppose it's possible if Steve got recruited by somebody, like a senator or somebody, which is what happened with Garner, he might play the role that this guy is playing. If he found a senator or a congressman or another official or a secretary who's really totally and utterly behind him, he might end up working for him. I mean, John Podesta is probably the best example of this, the guy who said we have a right to know and a need to know, etc. It's the truth, it's the law, etc., etc. And then of course Steve wanted Hillary Clinton to win the presidency, so then anyway, I've been through that already, and Steve thinks that Hillary was going to be the disclosure president. We got Trump instead, and Steve was disappointed, and I've been through all that as well. I think Steve is wrong to be disappointed with that. As you can see, look, make America great again. Hey Russell, it doesn't quite fit on Russell's head, otherwise I'd put it on there. Anyway, so this is what he wants. He wants, basically, he says, he gives them these files, and there's all kinds of stuff in there, and Hynek says, what's this? And he says, this is material that was never given. These are sightings reports of UFOs and other pieces of evidence of UFOs that were never given to Project Blue Book. They were kept somewhere else. We found out later that they were kept by General Valentine in his office. Now this is a bit this is where Project Blue Book really cuts close to the core of reality. This is why it's such a bloody good series. Project Blue Book is the official US government investigation into UFOs. It ran for a very long time. It ran for almost 20 years. Hynek was involved throughout it all in the real life. And at the same time, you'd think that anything to do with UFOs, well, it goes to Project Blue Book, doesn't it? Because Project Blue Book is the official investigation into UFOs. And then suddenly you find out that the government is carrying out, essentially, it's a separate investigation, classified, of which Project Blue Book is kept completely out of the loop. That has to be, obviously this is something that Hynek and Quinn are aware of. I mean, they've already gathered this in season 1. And indeed the real J. Allen Hynek also came to this conclusion, and eventually, during the time that he was at Project Blue Book. So, I mean, it did cross my mind actually that there's going to be some kind of plot hole here, or some kind of a plot device in this particular episode, and maybe beyond, where it'll turn out that this is some kind of disinformation. And of course, I mean, when he hands, I mean, there is another parallel in real life with what this Andrew Garner is doing with Quinn and Hynek. and that, of course, unfortunately, is the Benowitz affair. Handing over secret files to them and saying, look, here's this vital information here. All you have to do is like play ball with me, and there's more coming. We want to get the word out. We think you're the guy to help us. You know, boost, you know, rub their ego and things like that. And you know, so all you have to do is work with us. And of course, the Benowitz affair is one of the most disreputable incidents in all of ufology. It's what happened was. A spy, a guy who worked for the Air Force Office of Special Investigation, a guy called Richard Doty, essentially was spying on private individuals with an interest in UFOs and UFO groups. And one of them was a guy called Paul Benowitz, who Doty encouraged him to seek out UFOs and UFO sightings, and basically manipulated him behind the scenes. At the same time, he recruited a guy called William Moore, who you may know as the co-author of the original Roswell book, The Roswell Incident, Charles Berlitz and William Moore. It's a long, complicated and really quite sordid story, but in the end Benowitz died, and I don't think anyone suspected, I don't think anyone thinks there's anything suspicious about that, but there is, some people blame what was done to him, the fact that he lost his mind, he lost his mind, he became mentally ill. Benowitz, you know, was a sincere guy. He was a World War II veteran, a former fighter pilot, loved his country, wanted to help his country, and, well, his country used him. Same with, well, William Moore, that's another story. I'm not going to go into details about that, but this seemed like a bit of a parallel with the Benowitz affair. It did cross my mind that this may be where the story is leading. We don't know yet, but anyway. He gives them these files, and he says, look, this is not just about our national security. This is about changing history. And this guy doesn't mince his words. This Andrew Garner character, he doesn't mince his word. This is about you doing something to change history. In other words, disclosure. But Quinn is suspicious. He suspects they're being used, and he says to. What's happened is they're on the plane together, and Quinn says to Hynek, he says, you're the only guy I trust in the world, really, right now. I think you should return these files. And well, I think we're being used. So I think it may have crossed Quinn's mind that there's something going on. It sounds a bit too good to be true. So there's a lot of intrigue in this episode. It's absolutely fascinating. I was glued to it. Anyway, Susie does a runner. Susie, after everything that happened last time, again, this is Susie's story is not confined to any one episode. It's spread over the entire season. As I've explained before, this season 2 is different from season 1 in the way that, in several different ways. You get the feeling it's more like a serial, and each episode is kind of just one part of that serial. Whereas in season 1, it was more like separate stories in each episode. Although there was a story arc that covered the whole season. You still get the different episodes are more separate. They're more independent in terms of plot. Interesting thing about season 2 as well. The episodes are like 44 minutes long, but the titles only come in about 10 minutes in. So you have like a 10-minute prologue sequence, really, and then they play the titles. It's unusual. It's not a significant thing. It's just an unusual stylistic device, I think, an unusual style that they've chosen to go with in this particular program. Anyway, Susie phones her controller, and the controller, because Susie's a renegade now, even though she's killed a Rizzuto, like she promised. She wants to get out now. This handler of hers, this older woman with brown hair, who's like the KGB controller, says, "Oh, you've lost it. You've lost it completely. You've fallen in love with Michael Quinn." Now, I did hope that they wouldn't go with this cliche. Unfortunately, I think they did. It's not certain, but unfortunately, I think they did. of course, it is a cliche, and it's played out over and over again. You get like the spy, the undercover agent who's running a contact through vice or through seduction, sexual corruption, things like that, and but then they fall in love with their contact. It makes a good story, and it's repeated many times, including in the soap operas. I mean, there was this awful situation with Phil Mitchell was being spied on by this policewoman, this police intelligence agent, this officer and she had to seduce him and pretend to be his girlfriend, and of course she fell for him and she resigned from the police force. Oh God, EastEnders is a bloody terrible programme, it really is. I hope they wouldn't go with this cliche, because it's very unrealistic. I mean, I've been learning a lot about espionage lately, because of the book I'm writing, the Obscurati Chronicles, is going to feature espionage as a plot device, as a plot element. Susie is a highly trained undercover officer for the KGB. She's Russian, she speaks perfect English, and she's got a fake identity, completely and utterly separate. She's like what they call an illegal. An illegal means she's not attached to any embassy, she doesn't have any official role within the Soviet diplomatic mission. She's completely undercover. We also know that she's utterly ruthless. She can lie, she can manipulate, she can kill. She's murdered 3 people in the course of this program, okay, in the course of this series now. We know, and she does it without a qualm, and she can dispose of bodies by cutting them up and things like that. So she's a very hard, pseudo-psychopathic character. The idea that kind of professional poise could be just dissolved when she meets some guy with, some tall dark stranger, who's like Quinn is, a handsome tall dark stranger, is totally divorced from reality. Anyway, Quinn and Hynek go into work one day, and they find that guess what? Supposedly the Office of Special Investigation, Richard Doty's branch. I don't know if that Doty-like character is going to come into this, but anyway, it did make me wonder, because they'd taken over the office because they found out that some files had been missing from the classified materials section. Basically, that's what General Valentine and General Harding have, the 2 officers, the 2 generals running Project Blue Book, and of which Quinn and Hynek have no access. Well, guess what these files are? They're the ones that have just been handed over by this Garner character to Hynek. And he's still standing there looking like this. He's got his briefcase in his arm, and Quinn's sort of looking down the briefcase, and this guy's grilling him, this special investigator's grilling him. And he says, Quinn, get that bloody briefcase out of here! Anyway, Project Blue Book is then suspended. It's like it's shut down temporarily while there's an investigation. And it turns out that then there's a shot with Valentine and Harding sort of like debriefing each other. It turns out they know what Quinn and Hynek have been up to. They know about the missing files, and they know that they have them. I mean, and at the same time, well, Hynek goes home and he sees shadows outside the house, like there's prowlers running around, and we don't know who they're there for, because we find out later on. But Susie has gone back to Mimi, and she's staying there with some cock and bull story about her husband again, who's been hitting her. So we see these prowlers outside, and we don't know who they're there for. Are they there for Hynek, or are they there for Susie? But anyway, it turns out that Quinn talks to Faye, the secretary, about this, and they suspect that Mimi is the burglar. And Quinn thinks that Mimi basically did this on Hynek's instructions, because Hynek's done this before, hasn't he? In season 1, he stole that artifact from the base. Now, in that case, it was Mr. Fixer who gave him the keys, but Quinn is concerned because Hynek has kept secrets from him before. So, despite the fact that he says that Hynek's the only person in the world he can trust, he can't trust Hynek completely, can he? In the meantime, Harding and Valentine do their own investigation into Garner, and they do it by using Dan, the CIA man, Agent Daniel Banks of the CIA, who's set Garner up with a prostitute, and this prostitute is working for him. And this is very interesting, because this ties back into MK Ultra, and again, it's a spin-off of MK Ultra, because what they do is they're using LSD basically, when Garner's with this prostitute, she gives him a drink and everything, and it's got LSD in it. And Dan says that the agency has been using LSD as a truth serum, which of course those kinds of experiments were actually done. They did this after prisoners of war came back from the Korean War, and it turns out that they had been mind controlled in some ways, and this basically inspired a US project. I mean, you may have seen the Manchurian Candidate, which is basically based on this very thing. There's some inaccuracies to the Manchurian Candidate. The original one, not the original one with Angela Lansbury, not the remake. That's not very good. Which has forgotten her name now. It'll come to me in a minute. That actress who tends to play very sinister female characters. Not Uma Thurman. Oh, I'll just stop. It'll come to me in a minute, because you know what it's like. Just don't think about it for a while. It'll come to you. So that's a weird thing, isn't it? That they've included this in Project Blue Book, and it's interesting. It's very interesting. It's like they did the remote viewing thing earlier on. Dan was involved in that too, the psychic laboratory, and now he's involved in drugging people to get information out of them. And so. Back at the house, the Hynek house, Mimi confesses, and it turns out she was the burglar. And of course, this is interesting, and a lot's been going on that we haven't seen before. I mean, we know that Mimi has been sneaking into the base, but since the Robertson panel, she's not been allowed in. But she's been sneaking in, and Faye allowed her in at one point, against the rules. And so this is why Faye is very worried. Faye herself actually thinks she's going to be charged, but she says yes, she did it because after the Robertson panel, Mimi was very upset by what was done about how her husband's reputation was tarnished by Dan and everything else, and how Project Blue Book was almost shut down. And she thought that by doing this she could save her husband's reputation. So she's the one who got the files which went to this senator, whoever he is, who then went to Garner, and then Garner gave them to Hynek and Quinn under the table, basically behind the backs of the official source, the official leaders, Project Blue Book and stuff like that. And in these files there's all kinds of stuff, including references to Hangar 18 and flying saucer plans, which confirms that John, the engineer, his story. And now Hynek and Quinn clash, because Quinn gets cold feet. He wants to just hand these things over, just get it over with. Hand these files over. Hynek wants to hang on to them. But something weird happens then, and this brings into General Harding again. In the brothel, Garner is like tripping on LSD, which was this prostitute gave him, who's working for Dan and the CIA. And he's like, he starts like acting really strangely, like he says he gets amazing insights. I can hear the voice of God and things like that. Once more, he can see through this two-way mirror that the guys have set up in the brothel room. And Harding and Valentine are utterly spooked by this, because this guy can suddenly see through this two-way mirror. They run into the room. Luckily the prostitute, she's still sort of half-dressed. They haven't actually done anything yet in that respect. And Garner goes up to him and says, "Are you ready to hear a message from God?" And Harding is really freaked out by this, because in previous episodes, I can't remember which one, we know that he is Roman Catholic. He's a devout Roman Catholic. He goes to confession, and he's very troubled through his faith. Now, in the house, the KGB assassin, we find out exactly what's going on, because who the prowlers were, and there's a guy down the road parked in a car, because he breaks in. He's this big bald thug, and it turns out he's a KGB assassin, and he's come for Susie. But Susie kills him, and just as he's dying, he starts speaking to her in Russian, and then her cover is blown, because Hynek, Mimi and Quinn are all there, and they suddenly realise she's not who she appears to be. And Susie then the police are on the way, because Susie's called the police after what happened, and the files, and then Susie offers to take the blame for stealing the files and for killing the guy. She offers to confess everything, take the blame. And even though Mimi and Quinn are very, very angry with her for lying to them, you know, Mimi suddenly said, you set this all up, you pretended to be my friend and everything. Who are you really? We know her name is Misha, the name they give her is Misha, and that's when she's talking to the Russians. Susie's not her real name, of course. But she's a woman of mystery, of course. Then back at the office, something strange happens. Hynek and Quinn get a call from none other than the senator. A senator. We find out later this senator is probably the guy who's been employing Garner, because he talks to Quinn and Hynek and asks about the Washington DC invasion, and they give him on the phone they give him the official line, temperature inversions, and he says, "Guys, you're lying to me. I know, because Defense Secretary Fairchild told me a lot about UFOs before he died." This is going back to season 1, where this Defense Secretary gets blown up in a car. And before he goes, apparently he showed the senator film footage of the missile being shot down, like Bob Jacobs talks about, where the flying saucer comes. There's a missile test. The flying saucer appears, shoots beams of light at this rocket, which then blows up. If you ever see the documentary UFOs and Nukes, or read the book, it talks about this, or watch any lecture by Dr. Bob Jacobs. I met Bob Jacobs, he spoke at UFO Truth, and I met him there. So this senator knows all about UFOs and knows that the official story of the Washington DC invasion is fake. And this senator is actually none other than John F. Kennedy, and he's played by Casper Philipson, who's a Danish actor, and it's really good because they got his hair just right. He looks just like him. Very, very very interesting. And this is, of course, is going to bring in, I've got a feeling this is going to carry on, and Kennedy's going to come back into it. This is a real life person who's often been associated with UFOs. In fact, 10 years later, he's shot, of course. And it's a long story, and I don't have time to go into it now, but I've written articles about this. And I think I've probably mentioned this in previous videos. There's good reason to think that his interest in UFOs is what killed him, and indeed killed his lover Marilyn Monroe the previous year. Yes, indeed. So that's an interesting connection, isn't it? Anyway, a letter turns up for Quinn, and it's from John, the engineer, the Bob Lazar type character, and it's got a key in it. Now the key is not a normal key; it's like a metal punch card, and it's interesting that the punch card is like a musical stave, like 5 lines, and then there's like notes on it. And I think the notes are actually the 5 tones from Close Encounters of the Third Kind. A little bit of a tribute there to that movie, which has obviously inspired the makers of Project Blue Book. And so, of course, they sit there, and he says, "Well, here's the key to the Hangar 18 basement." And so, of course, Quinn. There's a final sequence of this episode which is absolutely superb. It's outstandingly good. Quinn and Hynek go to Hangar 18. At the same time, this is interspersed with another scene, which is Dan, the CIA man, paying a visit to Harding. And I think, what the hell's this about? Because Dan, of course, has essentially done the dirty on Project Blue Book in the Robertson panel, if you remember. Now, but what the hell's going on? And it's almost unbelievable, but Dan sells Harding some LSD, the LSD he was using for his attempts to get information out of people by drugging them, for these prostitute drugging them. And the reason is Harding is because what Garner said, "Are you ready to have a message from God?" And of course, some people believe, and I think this is a very, very interesting possibility here, but I think it's correct, because I've been looking into this myself, that certain substances, including LSD, have the ability to put people into an altered states of consciousness where they have spiritual experiences. And I won't go into details, but I have covered this in other videos. For example, ayahuasca or mescaline. These are taken by indigenous peoples, these drugs, so they can have spiritual experiences and can have a connection to the divine. I do recommend Supernatural by Graham Hancock. Great book about that. I also reckon DMT, The Spirit Molecule by Rick Strassman. And it appears that possibly the writers of Project Blue Book understand this point, and indeed they have brought this point in from one of their characters, General Harding. He says he's troubled through his faith, and it is his work with the UFOs and aliens. Because he knows a lot more than Hynek and Quinn do, because he's like, this has been revealed to us. It was revealed in episode 1 of season 1 that Harding and Valentine know all about this stuff, which Quinn and Hynek do not. They're fooling Quinn and Hynek. They're using them. As Quinn said, we're being used. Not in the way that Quinn meant there, but they are being used. And this is troubling his faith. This is why he went to confession in a previous episode, and now he wants to take the LSD to get this message from God that Garner was talking about. Very interesting, very interesting. A totally unexpected twist that I really didn't think would happen. Very, very good indeed. Very good. This, of course, this is 1953. So it's long before like the serious work into what Terence McKenna called entheogens, psychedelics, hallucinogenics, whatever you call them, was done. Very interesting indeed. In the meantime, Quinn and Hynek use the key with the 5 tones on. You don't hear it. They put it in this electronic lock and it opens, and they go down in a lift. They open it. It opens out. They come in. They find themselves in an underground chamber. There's nothing there. And Quinn goes, they must have cleaned up in here and moved somewhere else. Maybe they did. Maybe they went to Area 51, which, as I said, we know that in the story, Area 51's already opened, although in reality it didn't open until 2 years later. But in the story, as we know from episode 3 of the 2nd season, which I've reviewed, you can watch my review of that, Area 51 does exist. So that's it. And then, so really, this episode is, as often happens, it's obviously designed to carry on. The story that's being explored in this episode is obviously designed to carry on in the next one. So it ends on a cliffhanger, which is a bit of a pun. If you spell hanger with H-A-E-N-G-A-R instead of E-R, then it's a bit of a cliffhanger 18, isn't it? Yeah. So I'm really, really excited now to do episode 9, to watch episode 9, review it for you guys, because it's really heating up. This season it's drawing to a finale. There's only 2 more episodes to go in season 2. Hopefully there'll be a season 3, but who knows what will happen between now and then. There's 2 more episodes to go, and it's starting to get really, it's coming up to the denouement, the climax of the story. I think this particular episode was outstandingly good, very good, best one in season 2 at least. Really do recommend it. And obviously it's gearing up, it's setting the scene for something very dramatic in episode 9 and 10. So I'll review those for you, and then when I've done that, I'll try and keep the schedule up, doing 1 a day, and if I can do that, then sometime next week there will be a live stream. There will be a live stream on Project Blue Book Season 2. So keep your eye out for that. Keep your eye out for my reviews as episode 9 and 10, and then for the live stream coming up. Thank you very much, all of you, for watching HPANWO TV. Hospital Porters, Pride and Dignity. Stop the New World Order.